It's happening with increasing frequency. We're doom scrolling and we see the message. We wake up to read the news. We get a text from a friend. Or we turn on the radio and hear what happened. Another rock star has died. This always comes as a shock. It's mitigated somewhat if the rock star in question is older or has known health or substance issues. But when it's someone young or someone seemingly healthy, it's extra hard to deal with. This was the situation on the morning of Saturday, March the 26th, 2022. Foo Fighters fans awoke to the news that Taylor Hawkins, the band's beloved drummer and Dave Grohl's best friend in the whole wide world, had died. This didn't make any sense. This guy had the greatest job in the world. He loved what he was doing. He and Dave and the highly protective Foo Fighters organization looked after him. He was physically active. He had a loving family. He had supportive friends throughout the music industry and beyond. And any drug problems he had were at least 2 decades behind him. Taylor's death was completely unexpected and a complete shock to the entire music world. It was one of the most high-profile rock star deaths of the 21st century. But strangely, there are gaps in what the public knows about what happened. And when there are gaps, conspiracies abound. This is another episode of Uncharted Crime and Mayhem in the Music Industry. And it's everything we know about the death of Taylor Hawkins. And it's quite the story.
It's time to learn to love again. It's time to life is time again.
Dave Grohl, the Foo Fighters, dozens of friends and family, and thousands of fans together at Wembley Stadium in London on September 3rd, 2022. It was a massive tribute concert to one of the most likable people in rock, Foo's drummer Taylor Hawkins, who died in a hotel room in Bogota, Colombia on the evening of March 25th, 2022. There were many questions and theories about how and why he died so unexpectedly. I want to dig into everything that's known so we can debunk the conspiracies and come up with the best possible conclusions we can. I've reached out to everyone I know to acquire the closest approximation to what really happened. I met Taylor several times. In 2014, I was invited to 606 Studios, the Foo Fighters headquarters in Van Nuys, California, to talk about the Sonic Highways album. It's a really hard place to find, tucked away in a nondescript residential area. I got there before everyone else. Except Taylor. He treated me like an old friend, and we sat and we talked for over half an hour about music and cars and drums and travel. The entire time, he had that beaming smile. He was a terrific host, just as he'd been on every other occasion we'd met. Once again, I forgot that I was talking to the drummer of one of the most successful bands on the planet. I was just, chatting with this guy, this really, really happy, really normal and friendly guy who treated me like a long-lost buddy. He even made me an espresso with plenty of flourish. Later, when everyone was set up for the interview in the big room, I asked everyone this question, and Taylor was the one who answered first.
I've seen you guys, I don't know how many times, and there has never been a time where I've looked at you and thought to myself, there are 5 guys on stage having more fun than anybody should ever be allowed to have. I mean, the joy that comes off the stage from you guys at every single gig about, isn't this great? Isn't this awesome what we get to do for a living? It's unbelible.
Well, why shouldn't it be?
Well, it's a pretty good way to make a living.
We get paid tons of money to go play rock and roll. Is that a bummer? No, it's
just
not.
Just break it down, Hawkins. Hawkins broke it down.
That's the simplest terms. I mean, there's all sorts of little shit things happening all the time, but basically when you come down to it, yeah, we're really lucky.
This is a guy who knew he'd won the lottery and had everything to live for. Everything I know and witnessed about Taylor Hawkins and the Foo Fighters organization gave me the impression that not only was this a sophisticated and extremely successful business, but a gang, a family, a bunch of people who were going to stick together through everything. Taylor was a fan favorite with his goofy enthusiasm. He was the yin to Dave's yang, the whole brothers from another mother thing. They kept each other grounded, And when Taylor stole the show with his antics or singing, everybody was totally fine with that. So, how did he end up dying? Answers are hard to come by because there was an immediate information blackout on his death. Total radio silence from the Foo Fighters about the specifics of why he died. But after years of following this story, here's what I've managed to piece together. First, though, we should start at the beginning. Taylor is a Texas guy, born in Fort Worth on February 17, 1972. His family moved to California when he was 4. His first concert was at age 10 when he got to see Queen. And I quote, "After that concert, I didn't think I slept for 3 days. It changed everything. And I was never the same because of it. It was the beginning of my obsession with rock and roll, and I knew I wanted to be in a huge rock band." It was after that he started playing drums, and that led to a gig in a country band called Sylvia.
There wasn't really much of a scene of any sort where I lived. Everybody played reggae music.
Which was where?
Orange County, Laguna Beach, California. And everybody liked reggae. So hard rock was really frowned upon. You were a Hesher. You were from the Valley. You were not cool. You weren't a surfer. Surfer.
That's so weird.
It is what it is, So my punk rock became Rush and Queen and stuff because I had to hide those records from my brother and his friends and
If
stuff
he
like
didn't
that.
listen to Level 42, he'd get his ass
It's
kicked.
not level 42. It's like, like the 80s new wave and stuff, which actually I love all that stuff. And I liked all that, but I also liked, Rush and Queen and stuff because I did want to be the guy on the poster. I did, So, there wasn't really much. So my bands were not, I didn't really have, I had bands kind of, but there were more bands that just played in garages that rarely ever played. I played in a cover band for a while, sort of. That's when I realized you could actually make money playing music. I played a wedding and we didn't get paid, and my mom went down to the guy that worked, where the guy worked and fucking screamed. We got our money.
Amazing.
So yeah.
Mom got your money?
Yeah, my mom got our money for us. But that was the first time I got paid to play music. I remember so I figured at best, And LA was kind of close, but it seemed so far away, And it wasn't until when I got in high school I heard Jane's Addiction, and it was funny because up until then, all I was listening to was music from 5 or 10 years before, Queen and Police and whatever, all that sort of classic rock and early new wave stuff or whatever. And then when I heard Jane's Addiction, because it was all Warrant and all that kind of crap, whatever they call hair metal now, which was just like blah music, And then I heard Jane's Addiction, and it was like dudes that could play, like the dudes in the poster, but they were a mess, and they were disgusting, and they were awesome, and they were scary. And I just became a complete, disciple of them.
Same story. It's just that Jane's is your punk rock.
Yeah, I guess so. I went to John Anson Ford Theater. They did 7 nights up here in LA, and I was just like, Perry Farrell came out on stage with green dreadlocks and a woman's hat on, and he told the first guy in the front row to the second he came out on stage. I was like, these guys are crazy. They're the best at that time for me.
That led to a gig in the backup band for Canadian singer Sass Jordan. Let's let Taylor tell that story.
Hey, I got a friend here tonight. I'm gonna tell you a quick story, okay? Back in 1994, I was working at this music store, and I met this guy, and he said, hey, you're working at a music store. Is that what you want to do with your life? And I said, no, I want to be in a big rad rock band. So he said, well, I know this cool chick, and she is going on tour. She's going to Europe to open up for Aerosmith, and she's Canadian. He said, her name is Sass Jordan. I don't know, does anybody know who that is here? I think you do. Okay, well this woman took some dip like me, 22-year-old who didn't know a greenhorn, on the road, taught me how to be in a rock and roll band. She gave me my first rock and roll check. And tonight I get to play with her again. I haven't played with her in a long time. Can you guys say hello, Sass Jordan? Say hi, Sass!
Sass Jordan right now!
This is like the third eye thing here.
Let me tell you, Sass,
Yes, Dave.
all roads lead to the Foo Fighters. So if it weren't for Sass Jordan, Taylor Hawkins wouldn't be in a Foo Fighters right now.
Damn true.
So everybody say, thanks, Sass! Say louder, thanks, Sass! Louder, say Sass!
When the Sass Jordan job ended, he found new work with Alanis Morissette, shortly after her career blew up with the Jagged Little Pill album in 1995. He was her drummer on the Can't Not tour. He was 23. Taylor brought new life to Morissette's songs. The loops and drum machines on Jagged Little Pill were replaced by his live drums, and he really made things come alive for the year that he toured with Alanis. He also appeared in several videos and was in her band when Alanis performed on David Letterman in 1995.
Every time you speak her name, you should know how you told me and hold me until you died. Until you died, but you're still alive. And I'm here to remind you of the mess you left when you went away.
The Foo Fighters came on the scene at around the same time. They and Alanis kept crossing paths at summer festivals. It was backstage at one of those festivals that Taylor first met Dave Grohl. They became such tight friends that Alanis actually said, "When are you just going to quit and join the Foo Fighters?" So in 1997, he did. The timing was right. William Goldsmith, the original Foo's drummer, wasn't working out, and a lineup change was in order. Dave called up Taylor. "Do you know of anyone I could hire?" And Taylor's response was, "Yeah, me. Alanis is bigger than the Foo Fighters right now, but I want to be in a real band, not backing up a solo artist." He was willing to jump from the group behind the biggest act in the world at that time to what was, let's face it, a largely up-and-coming, unproven new band. And on March 18, 1997, it was announced that Taylor Hawkins was officially a Foo Fighter. Taylor brought a different style and feel to the Foos. It's subtle, but if you compare any of the band's recorded work before March 1997 to what came after Taylor joined, you can hear it. Taylor was brought up on prog rock, Queen and Rush, for example. But he was also influenced by the intricate playing of Stuart Copeland of The Police, the melodic playing of Stephen Perkins of Jane's Addiction and Ringo Starr, and the special feel Phil Collins brought to Genesis. The first Foo Fighters album to feature Taylor Hawkins was There Is Nothing Left to Lose, which came out in November 1999. Taylor is also a co-writer on all 11 songs. As the months and years went by, Taylor's contributions increased. He sang lead on a number of songs. During concerts, he started to step out from behind the drums and take over the frontman job from Dave Grohl for a bit. Between Foo's albums and tours, he formed a band called Taylor Hawkins and the Coattail Riders. And you gotta love the self-deprecating humor there. It also showed how humble he could be. But there were problems too. For this, we have to go back to the summer of 2001, when Taylor was partying a lot. He wasn't a junkie, but he also didn't say no a lot. He believed in the whole ethos of living hard and fast and maybe dying young. Dave knew he was using and constantly told him that he had to stop. Taylor later had this to say, "I loved doing drugs, but I just got out of control for a while and it almost got me. I was heading down a road that was going to lead to even worse paths. When someone's sober, or they'd like a glass of wine with dinner, or they want a bottle of Jägermeister before they go on stage, or they like to smoke doobies all day long, everyone has their own path. I just took it too far." One night, after playing shows in Stafford and Chelmsford, England, on August 18th and 19th, 2001, Taylor was offered a line of something at a party tied in with the V2001 festival. That line was heavy on the heroin, and he overdosed. By Monday the 20th, he was in the hospital. The record company stated that he'd engaged in some overindulgence, but was in stable condition. And gigs at a Portuguese festival, headliner gigs in Scotland and England, and a support slot for U2 at Slane Castle in Ireland had to be cancelled. Things were much worse than anyone was told. Taylor was in a coma. He stayed that way for 2 solid weeks. Dave Grohl was at his side at the hospital. He was there the entire time, and I quote, "When Taylor wound up in hospital, I was ready to quit music, because to me, it felt like music equated death. I started praying. I've never been to church in my life, and I'm walking back from Taylor's hospital to our hotel every night, praying out loud in the streets of London. I've seen so many people lose it all with drugs and die, so I freaked out. Let's consider the last part of that statement. Dave has lost many people close to him over the course of his life, including, of course, Kurt Cobain. He never, ever wanted to go through that pain again. He did not want to see this happen to his best friend. No, not again. Taylor did make a full recovery. He later said this: "I was the stupid kid who was going too far. And if you set a line in front of me, I'd say, yeah, I'll do that. I was messing with drugs, with heavy drugs, and there's no happy ending. You'll experiment, you'll do everything, but at the end of the day, remember, there's no happy ending." He later said, if you have an addictive personality, you're going to get drawn into it. You got to be careful, man. Recovery was difficult too. He had trouble reading. He developed an odd tic, but he worked hard at getting better and improving his situation. Now, from all we have been told, he never wanted to go through that again. He stopped smoking, he dramatically cut down on his drinking, and got deeper into things like mountain biking and surfing. Here's another quote from Taylor post-coma. "I'm glad I got knocked on the head at that point. I wouldn't take anything away that I've done or been through either, because it's all part of the trip and the journey. I'm trying to be as candid as I can be." So let's unpack all this. Taylor Hawkins had a near-death experience with drugs. People who weren't into drugs wanted him to get and stay straight. This included his best friend, who was already experienced with the pain of someone suffering drug addiction, and by this time, Taylor had a family who depended on him. Let's also remember that Pat Smear is a member of the Foos. He was a touring guitarist with Nirvana when Kurt died, and he was also very, very messed up by his death. And not only are the Foo Fighters a tight-knit band, a gang, and a family, like I've said, but they're also a multi-million-dollar business that employs dozens of people. That business also has commitments extending years into the future, recording, touring, and other projects. And Taylor Hawkins was a key part of that business. So, taken all together, there is every reason to expect that everyone surrounding Taylor Hawkins had a very strong and continuing interest in keeping him straight and healthy for all sorts of personal and professional reasons. Keep all this in mind because we're going to have to come back to it. Next, though, all the events involved on the day that Taylor died. Like everyone else, the Foo Fighters were sidelined through 2020 and 2021 because of COVID. This was hugely disappointing because 2020 was the band's 25th anniversary, and they had all kinds of plans to celebrate that. They had sketched out something called the Van Tour 2020. The plan was to tour through the same cities that they hit on the very first Foo Fighters tour in 1995. They'd even found a beat-up old van that they'd take with them. Tickets went on sale 3 weeks before the COVID lockdown. Some early dates were rescheduled, but by July, it was obvious that nothing was going to happen, so the Van Tour 2020 was officially canceled. And with no touring revenue, the Foos had to bide their time doing other things. Taylor, who had always had a bit of ADHD, formed a band with Dave Navarro and Chris Chaney of Jane's Addiction called NHC. They recorded an album's worth of material. The downtime was weird because the Foos were so used to being on the road. Between 2017 and 2021, they played more than 200 shows. When they weren't touring or recording, they were working on film projects like the Sonic Highway series for HBO and their goofy horror movie, Studio 666. In early 2021, they started doing some small gigs. There were also some live stream events and a couple of TV appearances. And then on June 20th, 2021, there was a big comeback show at Madison Square Garden in New York. COVID was over, and it was time to go on the road again. But Taylor apparently wasn't all that keen about this idea. He went along with his bandmates, but stress and anxiety had become a problem. Believe it or not, Taylor suffered from stage fright, and after COVID, it hit him very hard. Through the summer and fall of 2021, the Foos played 28 shows, including some club gigs, a couple of benefits, and their induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It wasn't exactly a tough schedule. The most they played was 7 shows a month. The last show of 2021 was supposed to be a post-race performance at the last Formula One race of the season in Abu Dhabi. The date was December 12th. A Foos team was sent ahead with all their gear, and roadies began setting things up. On December 10th, the Foo Fighters boarded a private jet for a flight to Chicago. That's where they were going to connect with a non-stop Etihad Airways flight to Abu Dhabi. But they never made it. Somewhere over the Midwestern U.S., an unidentified member of the Foo Fighters suffered an unforeseen medical issue. When the plane landed in Chicago, the band member was taken to the hospital. The post-race gig would not happen. Steve Licorice was the promoter of the F1 gig. He got an urgent message from band management. It was the band's management telling me that once the plane landed, a member of the band had to be rushed to a hospital in Chicago. My immediate reaction was to see if the person in the band were okay. Then the situation really hit me because the advance team from the Foo Fighters were already here in Abu Dhabi. The show was being set up. Even the band's gear had arrived. The Foo Fighters issued a statement. The band apologizes for any inconvenience or disappointment caused by this unexpected turn of events. And that was all we were told. The news blackout was complete. There were no additional statements or updates from the band. Even TMZ and the Daily Mail had nothing to report on the situation. Dave Grohl was spotted in LA right around Christmas, but that was about it, and there was no comment. Now, we'd later learn that the band member who collapsed on the plane was in fact Taylor Hawkins. He passed out. On the ground, he was hooked up to IVs at a local hospital. And that's about it for specifics. But whatever was wrong with Taylor was serious enough for the band to cancel an extremely high-profile gig and lose tons of money in the process. Management commented, "This is not true." Meanwhile, Taylor recovered, cut back on the mountain biking and other exercising to preserve his strength for the tour that was to come in 2022. After a Christmas break, presumably to get everyone healthy again, the tour restarted in Los Angeles. There were dates in Australia, followed by a swing through South America. Again, this was nothing crazy, no night after night schedule. There were plenty of days off. But let's back up. The previous June, when this now 26th anniversary tour began, Taylor didn't seem all that keen. Again, believe it or not, he had stage fright, and he felt that it was getting worse. After 18 months of not feeling the pressure of performing live, he realized that he really enjoyed not having that pressure. He told Pearl Jam drummer Matt Cameron, "I was feeling nice, not doing anything. It's nice being a loser for a year and a half." Taylor also learned a few things. He had sleep apnea, something he learned after his wife complained about his snoring. And he had an enlarged heart. That's called cardiomegaly, and it's a symptom of something else and not a disease unto itself. Taylor and his doctor knew all about this, and no one was concerned. Playing the drums is an intensely physical thing, requiring a lot of cardio. Taylor had been playing drums for decades, plus he was also biking and hiking and surfing and all kinds of other things. His doctor said, "Your heart's big because you exercise a lot. It's like a runner's heart. Don't worry, you're healthy." But according to people close to Taylor, say that he was tired, exhausted even. He lost a lot of weight and almost looked anorexic for a while before he hired a trainer, started working out, started eating better, and put on 15 pounds. Lots of water and push-ups and weightlifting and supplements like electrolytes and protein drinks. He turned 50, so he was determined to stave off aging as much as he could. When in a band like the Foos, and you've got a tour coming up, you get a pre-tour physical exam, usually for insurance purposes. Taylor had one of those and got the all clear from his doctor. On February 21st, 2022, Dave got a text saying that the COVID crisis was over and the touring industry was starting up again. The Foos would hit the road faster and harder than any other band of their size. Their touring schedule would be about the same as it had been in 2017 and 2019. And it wasn't like the Foos were worried about tour buses or scheduled airline flights. They were at the stage where they flew private wherever they went, and their hotels were luxurious. But Taylor apparently wasn't completely on board. He had a case of imposter syndrome, forever dogged by the idea that he wasn't good enough to be a drummer in the Foo Fighters. He was devoted to his kids and loved to drop them off at school in the morning. Now he'd be on the road for months at a time. And he was, understandably, concerned about becoming exhausted to the point of collapse again. One of his great friends was Chad Smith of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. One story is that he told Chad that, "I can't continue on this schedule, and I've got to figure something out." We also later heard from Pearl Jam drummer Matt Cameron. Taylor told him that he'd spoken to Dave, telling him that he just couldn't effing take it anymore. Were there similar conversations between Taylor and Foo's management? Management says no. Nevertheless, Taylor joined the band in preparing for 2022. He was, after all, part of the team, part of the gang, part of the family, and a key part of the business. It wasn't completely clear yet how many shows the Foos had booked, but 60 over the course of a year sounds about right. The first show of 2022 was February 16th in Los Angeles. Then it was a show in Tempe, Arizona. The band flew to Australia to play a festival on March 4th. And some say that Taylor was upset about this extra show because it just added to his stress and exhaustion. He was 50. How was he supposed to continue as if he were still 20? There was a break upon returning home before it was time to hit Mexico City on March the 15th. From there, a series of dates were set for South America. Santiago, Chile on March 15th, the Argentinian version of Lollapalooza on March 20th near Buenos Aires, and the Festival Estéreo Picnic in Bogota, Colombia on Friday, March 25th. The Foos wouldn't appear that night because a couple of hours before they were to hit the stage, Taylor Hawkins was dead. Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022, was not a great day in Asunción, the capital of Paraguay. The Foo Fighters were scheduled to headline a festival, but the weather was so bad that their appearance was canceled. With little to do, Taylor Hawkins wandered out into the lobby of the Sheraton Hotel where the band was staying. Some fans had gathered, including a 9-year-old girl named Emma Sofia Peralta. There was a drum kit set up in the lobby, and she was doing her best Foo Fighters impression. Taylor took time to pose for pictures with her. From Asunción, the Foos moved north to Bogota, Colombia. The next gig was a headliner slot for the Estéreo Picnic on Friday, March the 25th. The band would be on around 11 p.m. The Foos hotel was the Casa Medina, a very nice Four Seasons property in an area of the city known as Chapinero. According to those who were around Taylor that day, say that he was fine and in very good spirits, texting with friends back in the U.S. Everything was completely normal until after 7 o'clock that night, when a private hotel doctor was summoned to a room. At 7:40, paramedics arrived. They'd received a call that a guest was suffering chest pains. That was Taylor. But by the time they arrived, he was unconscious, and they couldn't revive him. He was dead. How? Why? Years later, we are not sure. There was an autopsy. His enlarged heart was confirmed. It weighed 600 grams, about twice normal. The fact that he suffered chest pains before he collapsed and died suggests that he suffered some kind of cardiovascular collapse. There was a preliminary toxicology test, but it was based on urine and not blood, and such a test isn't nearly as accurate as a full-on toxicology examination. Colombian authorities report that they found 10 substances in his urine during this very preliminary test. They found marijuana, big deal, tricyclic antidepressants, all prescription medicines, benzodiazepines, prescription anti-anxiety and insomnia meds, and opioids. Opioids. Well, wait. Before you jump to any conclusions about that last one, remember that opioids are included in everything from codeine cough syrup to Tylenol 2s, which you can get over the counter in some territories, and Tylenol 3s, which are commonly prescribed for pain. It was also well known that Taylor suffered from terrible sinus infections, which are awfully painful. Bogota is at an elevation of over 2,600 meters, and anyone who has bad sinuses know that altitude can make things worse. So maybe he needed painkillers. This toxicology report also doesn't provide the concentrations in which those substances appeared in his urine, and we don't know the specific combinations. And from the available information, there's nothing in this report that points to a drug overdose. Now, there was an early report from Colombian police that say a cocaine-like white powder and hallucinogens were found in Taylor's room. One Colombian newspaper reported that there was heroin in his system, but no one has ever confirmed either of those stories, nor has there ever been any follow-up. At this point, it's still a rumor based on one very preliminary newspaper report. What else did they find in Taylor's room? An empty beer can, an open bottle of vodka with plenty left inside. Again, big deal. Bottom line, There is nothing concrete from any police or medical report from any country that suggests Taylor died as the result of any kind of drug overdose. Let's go back to Taylor's medical history. During his last checkup, his doctor advised that based on his loud snoring and insomnia, there was a very good chance that he had sleep apnea. That's a condition that could lead to strokes, heart attacks, abnormal heart rhythms, and, in extreme cases, sudden death. And that enlarged heart? We've already heard that his doctor said that this was the result of decades of being a hard-hitting drummer and a big athlete. From the sounds of things, that doctor ruled out other causes like high blood pressure, thyroid issues, a virus, some kind of infection, an injury to the heart muscle, or a congenital condition. Conspiracy theorists, however, immediately had other ideas. Some asserted with all the confidence of a Nobel Prize winner that Taylor's death was caused by a reaction to the COVID-19 vaccine. They specifically pointed to the case of myocarditis, this inflammation of the heart muscle, a legitimate but extremely rare side effect of some recipients of the vaccine. However, given that Taylor and his doctor knew all about his big heart before COVID, kind of shoots down that theory. When I wrote about this on my website, the trolls came out in full force with some pretty obscene reactions. One email began this way: "Everyone with a brain knows that Hawkins was killed by mRNA poisoning, and the media claim of drugs only serves the blind who follow petty government narratives. Stop shilling for the fascist, Marxist, socialist, globalist capital." Wow, that's a lot of contradictions. "People are about to destroy their governments, and people like you will be remembered as the professional liars who push draconian enthymemes." No idea what an enthymeme is. Anyway, it got worse from there. Chris Shiflett of the Foo Fighters heard this kind of thing too. Here's a quote from him. "There's people out there saying shit like Dave killed Taylor by making him get the COVID vaccine. You're going to turn it into that? F you. I try not to pay attention to it, but it does make you very angry because that shit's just disrespectful." There were other theories too. Dave Grohl had Taylor killed because he knew that Taylor was planning to leave the Foo Fighters. Someone sent me a TikTok video proving that Taylor's death was a sacrifice to Satan. They went into depth with Kabbalah and numerology to show that this was, in fact, true. All right, lovely. But what really happened? What's the actual medical truth? We don't know. After Taylor died, there was a complete lockdown of news coming from the Foo Fighters camp, and no one, and again, not even TMZ or the Daily Mail, reported on anything further ever. Given that we're talking about a member of one of the biggest bands in the world, I find that remarkable and unusually airtight. There was coverage of a chartered 757 landing in Los Angeles with Taylor's body on board. We saw a video of a tearful Dave Grohl embracing his manager at the airport. And, well, that was it. There was no news about any subsequent forensic investigations or autopsies. Nothing about a funeral or memorial service. I found references to him being cremated and his ashes scattered in the Pacific. We know that Taylor left behind a wife, Allison, and 3 kids, Oliver, who goes by the name Shane, Annabelle, and Everly. And then there were 2 Taylor Hawkins tribute concerts in September 2022, one in London and the other in Los Angeles. Both were very, very emotional. Still, no comment from Dave or the band or management about the official cause of Taylor's death. I did my best to find out what happened to Taylor through some back channels I have, and I did manage to get a little tidbit through a third party. What I heard through this source convinced me that this was, in fact, a cardiovascular issue that was not brought on by any drug or substance abuse. That's all I should say. But I will tell you this, I have complete and utter trust in my source. It was not a drug overdose. Forget things like a COVID vaccine reaction, and it certainly wasn't foul play. It was some kind of heart condition exacerbated by factors such as stress, anxiety, fatigue, perhaps sleep apnea, and maybe the high altitude of Bogota. A heavier than normal heart can also be a symptom of certain cardiac diseases like cardiomyopathy. And in that case, it gets harder and harder for the heart to pump blood until it finally fails. In other words, Taylor had a big heart, literally, and it just gave out. Maybe one day we'll have a full accounting of what happened in that Bogota hotel room, right down to the full medical report. And I hope we do, because in the absence of information, we always get rumors and theories and conspiracies that have nothing to do with the truth. If you have any comments or questions about anything you hear on this podcast, shoot me an email, alan@alancross.ca. We can also meet up on all the social media sites, along with my website, ajournalofmusicalthings.com, which is updated with music news and music recommendations every day. And there's the free daily newsletter that you should get. And finally, please check out my other podcast, The Ongoing History of New Music, which deals with rock music at large. There are hundreds and hundreds of episodes that you can enjoy for free. See you next time for more stories of crime and mayhem in the music industry. Episodes arrive every 2 weeks. Technical productions by Rob Johnston. I'm Alan Cross.